Hi all, we will call the Town Council meeting of Tuesday, September 7th to order at 5 p.m. I, the Vice Mayor, am filling in for Mayor McAllister, who is away, and also Johanna Young will not be here tonight due to a family emergency. So welcome, and we will get started. Has everyone had a chance to read over the agenda? And are there any questions or any discussion? If not, I will entertain a motion.
I move that we approve the agenda.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Approved. All right, next we have the consent agenda. Shannon, do you have some information that you'd like to add as to the consent agenda?
It's a pretty slim consent agenda this month, and so there's really nothing, I think, that requires any detailed explanation or further explanation, unless there are any questions.
Does anybody have any question or discussions? And if not, I'll entertain a motion.
Move to approve the consent agenda.
Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All right, next we will move into public comment. And do we have anyone on our list tonight? Do not. Do I still need to call it to order? Or since no one is, all right. Since no one is here to speak during public comment, then we will move on to presentations and reports and start with Shannon, our town manager.
Thank you, Vice Mayor and council members. When I started putting this manager's report together, when I first sat down to do it, I thought, gosh, I'm not going to have anything to report on. It's all stuff I've reported on before. It's just ongoing, and it's just more of the same thing. But it turns out there actually is more than what I realized, and it kind of explains why we've been so busy. To begin with administration, reporting on contracts that have come in the last 30 days, we've had two. One is with AmeriCorps, which is the organization that helps us with our volunteer coordinator. So this is a program that connects youth getting into the workforce with employers who have different kind of job needs. And so we had submitted an application for a volunteer coordinator, and Zoe Codd has been with us for about 6 months. She's a little bit different. Most assignments are for 1 year, but this one, because she was available in the mid-year, we went ahead and brought her on, and understanding that our need for volunteer coordinator probably would go past a year anyway. So Zoe is entering into the first full year, and the cost of our share of that cost is $11,000. So we provide that to AmeriCorps, and they pay Zoe as they would normally. Our second contract is with the YMCA. It's a small contract, and it's arranged because it is based on a not yet determined number of employees participating in a wellness program. So we're offering our staff a subsidy for a YMCA membership so that they have the opportunity, makes it a little bit more affordable, and it improves the health of our workforce. So we think that's money well spent. It's a relatively small cost for this employee benefit, and there are some grants available that might actually offset the entire cost of that. So we're exploring those right now. Other news in the administration department, of course, Riverside Park and Taylor's Wave is an ongoing project. There has been a little bit of news today. We heard the Buncombe County Passive Recreation Subcommittee recommended awarding the town of Woodfin almost $2.2 million for the unfunded portion of Riverside Park. So we were really excited to hear that news, and gets us a lot closer to being able to wrap that project up. So this means once that money is awarded, we will amend our contract with Baker Grading and Landscaping, and be able to include, expand the scope of our current contract. We've also been doing some research into the emergency home repair program. I'm not going to go into detail on that now because it's going to show up later on your agenda, and I'll discuss it more then. Police chief recruitment has also been taken a lot of time this last month. We are preparing for our first round of interviews to kind of help narrow our field down. We had a really good, robust response to our posting. We had about 50 applications. And so it took us quite a while to kind of sort through them all and kind of pick our top tier candidates. And we'll be moving forward with those candidates here soon. We are still shooting for our in-person assessment process maybe around the middle of October, and are putting our different panels together for that. And then, of course, our summer newsletter has been sent to the printer. They have not yet told us when they expect to have it printed and ready and out the door. They're actually going to handle the mailing for us. So Gina, we haven't heard back from them, have we? Okay. So hopefully it'll be in the next week or so. I put end of summer newsletter. It's technically still summer, so, but our hope is, but it's not feeling like it so much these days, but it is. Moving on to other departments. In the planning department, the big focus has been the zoning text amendment that's on your agenda this evening, so I'll skip over that for now. And then the RFP for the code update has been completed. We're just putting some finishing touches on it, and it'll be posted this week. And we'll leave it up for about 30 days and then probably put together a small selection committee to go through those proposals. In our Public Works and Facilities Department, the Town Hall basement repair begins this week. It actually begins tomorrow. And so hopefully when that work's completed, it should just take a few days. And when it's done, it should resolve the stormwater infiltration problem we've been having in the basement. The RFP for paving at the Public Works Yard closes this month, and so we'll be able to get that paving work done soon. I don't think we're planning on it before the end of the year, maybe before the end of the year if we're lucky, but more than likely in the spring. Lake Town Lane, the stormwater work has been completed, and we have an on-site meeting, I think, next week to discuss just getting that work started. And we're also looking at maybe expanding, since we're going to be mobilizing. There is some additional repair beyond Lake Town Lane, kind of where it connects, where Senator Reynolds connects to, what is that, Keeping Kyle area. That is in pretty bad shape. It's kind of on the priority list, so that might very well be the very next road that we might want to prioritize. So if we're already mobilized, it may make sense for us to go ahead and do that. So we'll be looking at that as well. Moving on to stormwater. The big discussion this week has been taking over the Buncombe County stormwater permit closeout process. So when we adopted our ordinance, we had sat down with Buncombe County staff and had agreed that moving forward, we would handle any new applications, but for applications that were open and in process, Buncombe County would close those out. Well, a year later, I think the county staff are struggling in getting some of those projects wrapped up. And so they are now asking us to take over the closeout process. John and I have discussed this in some detail. There is really no precedent for it. It's not really directly addressed in the statute, whether or not we have authority to do this. But in speaking with the folks who have these applications, they're anxious to work with the town of Woodfin because our backlog is, well, we don't really have a backlog, and Buncombe County is just taking them much longer to get through the process. So they seem happy about it. So if there was a legal concern, it's low risk. And I'm not sure there really is a legal concern. So
How many are there?
we think there's somewhere in the neighborhood of somewhere between 30 and 40. But the large majority of those are projects that were more or less completed years ago, but just weren't closed out for some reason. It could be as simple as they just didn't record the documents, or they failed to complete the operational and maintenance agreements. And so a lot of it will probably be resolved just by us making contact with those property owners and, asking them for those materials so we can close it out. So other news in stormwater is the Adopt a Drain program was accepted. Riverlink is the nonprofit who administers that program. There is a cost associated with that program, but we feel like we can cover the cost by applying for a grant with the Pigeon River Fund. And it's really neat because not only would it help cover the cost of that program, which I think would add value to the town, but there's some other things that it might help fund, like rain barrels that we might be able to distribute to residents in Woodfin that would allow them to disconnect roof drains. So it's all good things to kind of help promote water quality. So that's been completed and submitted, and we expect to hear in the next month or two. In the Parks Department, Riverside Park and Taylor's Wave, in addition to the good news about the grant funding, our contractor and the engineers have been working on trying to address the dewatering challenges that they've been experiencing with the cofferdam. The cofferdam has been built for some time, and they've done some additional measures to help waterproof it so that they could empty it. But for reasons that they haven't quite been able to figure out yet, the pumps are not keeping up with the water infiltration. And so if you drive by, you'll still see water inside the dam. So they're working on that. They're not exactly sure of the cause. They do have a couple solutions or ideas that they want to explore. It may result in us having to go back to the permitting agencies to ask to use some additional materials that they had not originally wanted us to use, just because it works better for waterproofing. So stay tuned on that front. They're continuing to explore all of that. They were hoping to lower the water enough so that they could specifically identify where the water was infiltrating from, but I think they've even had trouble getting it down that far. And now with this rain that we've had for the last day, they've not made any progress. So hopefully soon, though.
How far is this putting us behind?
It is and it isn't. We have always had a plan B with the wave that we may only build half of it this year. The longer this goes, the more likely it may be that that is the case, but we really don't know. I mean, the contractor really wants to try to do it all in one event, but we may have to pull out at some point. But that was always contemplated, so that shouldn't affect our budget. As I mentioned, the Buncombe County Recreation Subcommittee meeting happened this afternoon. And when I wrote this, I didn't know what the outcome would be, so I couldn't say that we would be awarded, but we were, of course, awarded. Silverline Park restrooms, the water drawings were complete. I misunderstood and thought that that was the last thing we were waiting before we could submit for construction permits, but it actually is one of the things we were waiting for, and we're still waiting for the electrical, mechanical, and plumbing drawings. So, but hopefully we'll get those soon. And in the police department, I mentioned earlier, the police chief recruitment process is underway. Interviews will begin this week. And then into next week, with the assessment process still being planned for early to mid-October. Radar certification for all of our officers was completed. This is a tough thing. We had a number of officers who were not radar certified. We wanted them all to be radar certified, but this training only comes up once every so often, and it's difficult to even get one seat in that class. And so thanks to our interim police chief, Kevin Presley, he was able to reach out and arrange for a special class. And he actually even condensed the time frame so that all of our officers weren't off the road for the whole 5 days. Instead, it was 3 days. And we got all of our officers radar certified. So now that's great. Our old police vehicles were all sold on Gov Deals, and I think all but maybe one has been picked up, and our 5 new vehicles arrived. So we do plan to order 3 more this year, but because it takes so long for the vehicles that you order to come in, we didn't budget for them for this year. So we're expecting that they won't be ready until fiscal year 26, in which case we'll pay for them out of next year's budget. So, but we're going to go ahead and place the order this year. We are also looking at a whole-scale replacement of body cameras. For reasons I can't explain, all of our body cameras seem to be going on the fritz, and we are now down enough cameras that we're running the risk of not having officers with cameras, and so we're looking at a whole-scale replacement. And we're also exploring how to potentially offset costs. We're also exploring the Flock camera system. If you're not familiar with the system, these are standalone security cameras that are part of an integrated system. So all of our partners in Buncombe County use these cameras at strategic points in their jurisdiction. And it's basically license plate reader cameras. And so if you have a stolen vehicle or there's somebody with an open warrant, you can enter that information, and these cameras all over the county will read license plates and potentially identify where these individuals are. We recovered a stolen vehicle this week, and it was through the flock camera system that we were able to identify where it was and pick it up. Yes, sir.
The wholesale replacement of body cameras, are these all like different numbers of years in age? Are they recent acquisitions? They're probably out of warranty, obviously.
They're not recent acquisitions. These are old cameras. I don't think they are all the same age. I think we had some, and then we got some from Asheville or something like that. I'm not 100% sure. But they're all just kind of going on the fritz now. It reminds me of like your washing machine. As soon as the warranty expires, they all suddenly stop working. So.
And the fritz is basically someone has diagnosed that these are shot.
Yeah, they're definitely non-functional, and I don't know how easily it is to repair these kind of cameras, but we've just reached the point where it makes sense for us to just go ahead and replace all of them. And then our patrol officer recruitment is ongoing. We do have one of our new officers. We did get the paperwork that he is now ready to go out in the field, and so he'll be going out this week. And then we are planning another conditional offer later this week as well. So making progress. And that concludes my town manager report. I'd be happy to answer any other questions.
Any questions, discussion? Very easy. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, we will move on to new business with the public hearing ordinance 2024-017, requesting zoning text amendment to Chapter 54, updating the table of permitted uses, definitions, and special and limited use standards. And Ricky Hurley, our planning director, will lead this discussion.
Yes, thank you, Vice Mayor, for that introduction. So this has been kind of a long time coming. I think we had initial discussions from March, April to the Planning Board of Adjustment, seen it one time in the spring. Then we wound up coming back to take another bite of the apple, and they looked at it again in August and September of this year, actually 2 weeks ago when they voted to approve it. And it also kind of started out with looking at one or two uses in certain zoning districts, and it kind of snowballed. And it's like Shan says, when you open up the hood on some of these things, you start pulling out more than you realize. So it wound up being the table of uses, definitions, limited and special use standards. And so we'll kind of roll through this. I'll try not to go too fast, but I also don't want to drag this out into a 2-hour slugfest. Shannon will drag me out the door. So here's an example of the new clean table. Marie worked on this. It's got some color to it just for y'all's visual effect, and there's some gradation as you move from left to right to make it more visually appealing and also a little bit easier to look down. That's one of the things that when our current table, as you go down, it's your eyes start getting wrong. The other thing too to know is this table that we have today is about 6 pages long, and this will go down to 3.
That's great.
And a lot of that is from consolidation of manufacturing and industrial uses that are listed. And a lot of that was folded into industrial light or industrial heavy. And so that made a big, big change. At the Planning Board of Adjustments request and definitions, Marie worked on basically an Excel spreadsheet. So on the left column, you have a term. If it's black, that means it's an existing term that we're keeping. Red underline is a new term. The current definition is that. If it's in black, that's what we have. And then the proposed definition's in the right. If there's nothing in that right column, then we're keeping what we have in the middle. So that's what that's about 16 pages of definitions. Again, we struck a lot of definitions. And if you'll look at the end, you'll see that we struck a lot, again, associated with things like the industrial uses, like, If it was furriers or apple packing shed or I think bakeries that got folded in, we struck those uses. I think Marie worked really hard to make sure that every use listed has a definition. She kind of QC'd all that to make sure we matched up. Yeah.
Just for the council's benefit, and in case anybody at home is watching and looking at the meeting materials, whenever we do a text amendment, we always do what we call a strike-through copy or something that shows the actual ordinance language with edits. So new language underlined, language that's being removed, struck through. But sometimes we put other materials together, and in this case, Ricky and Marie have done a great job putting other analysis tools together to help planning board members and council members and anybody else who might be interested to be able to kind of compare in a different way. So that's what this table is.
Yeah.
So it shows the definitions, but in a table where you can see the old definition and the new definition. But there's also, for anybody who wants to see exactly what changed, you can go to those strike-throughs that are listed within the meeting materials for council as well.
Can I ask a question about that? This is exceedingly difficult, complex work. It's a large document with lots of changes, and whenever you make changes to large, complex documents, you inadvertently create areas and issues, errors. It's impossible to stamp them out. It happens gradually as you become aware of them. As we become aware of changes, once I'm assuming these eventually will be approved, as we become aware of changes to the corrections rather, do those have to come to council for each and every? Okay.
Yes, they will. Because we're anticipating a whole-scale zoning code rewrite with the code update that we're planning for this year, there will be another opportunity for us to kind of further refine definitions and special standards in the table. So, but this is, as I mentioned, and Ricky said too, is like it's hard to know once you start manipulating this, like it ends up kind of snowballing, and well, if you change this and you have to change this, and now that you changed
That's kind of what I meant. Yes.
So it just keeps growing in scope, so it gets difficult to know where to cut it off. So we do expect that there will be more refinement of this as we go.
Quick question. Sorry, this is a little granular, but it's on my mind because we dealt with it yesterday in county planning. Are we yet dealing with things like crypto mining and data centers? Are those?
It's in the table of uses. Yes, we've added that in
Okay.
for y'all. We can.
I'll look a little more closely at that.
Okay, that's fine.
We haven't had anybody approach us asking to add those uses.
I would be
but-
surprised.
Yes, but it's, table of uses should periodically be updated because something like, we had some uses that you just don't see these days, apple packing shed, furriers, that's just not that common any longer. But now we have new uses like server farms and data mine, so these are the things that we have to kind of constantly be updating.
So, like what you said, Phil, council member, car wash was one of those that we kind of like went in and out. Mary and I were like, poor automobile car wash. And Marie's like, that's car wash, Ricky. So that's one that we've had to chase down a couple times, make sure we had it in the ordinance tonight. So like example, the strike through that Shannon talked about here is limited uses. And to know about this one, so you got the black that's staying, the red underline is the new, and then the black strike through is what's being proposed for removal. As a note, limited uses are being expanded from 4 to 10 in this category. I say the most significant deletion is that of homestays, which is on the screen here. And then also we're adding some multifamily, cemetery, and place of worship as a small large. And then other examples would be daycare, outdoor storage, and shooting range. Several of these were requiring an SUP, like outdoor storage. It was the same standard over and over again through all these industrial or commercial uses. So instead of requiring somebody to come back to the PBOA every time, we just made that a standard, screening standard as a limited use in those districts. And that was one way we consolidated those SUPs down. So just point out, homestay is the one that we are proposing to remove. Just wanted to point that out to y'all. I've got a slide a little bit further down in here, but just as a exclamation point or underlining this use being deleted. Special uses, we're proposing this listing. Basically, we had a long checklist that was associated with group development, and it's a good practice not to include checklists in your code, but to have a separate standalone document. So we removed that, and that'll be housed kind of administratively in Maria and I's office. We can hand that out and update it as needed without having to come before the board to add a lighting plan or to adjust a lighting plan requirement. The other thing we've done is that we reduced the number of uses from 80 SUP uses to 28, potentially 27. And Ken, in one of those, as you see at the very bottom down there, number 6, data center and server farms was one of those we added. And that's limited to like one zoning district, like HI with a special use permit. And we explicitly say you cannot apply for a CZ. So we looked at another jurisdiction that has adopted regulations and reviewed that. So hopefully you had a chance to look down through there in that SUP. So, and as Shannon said, we occasionally have questions about campgrounds. We have questions about potentially concrete asphalt plants. So that's an SUP type that we added. Let me know if we need to run through those examples or. But again, most of the consolidation was because we eliminated a lot of industrial manufacturing uses that were like allowed in HI or LI. And then they said it's allowed in CS2 with a special use permit or CS3. So we kind of either eliminated that industrial use altogether out of that commercial district or kind of right-sized it. So again, notable changes. We're consolidating, like I said before, industrial and manufacturing uses into like a light or heavy manufacturing. And we have a pretty robust definition that's being added to the 5410. The other thing we've done too is like we had these bakeries and restaurants and dairy bars. They got folded into eating and drinking establishment. Probably the only thing that probably would stand out is a microbrewery, which is kind of a place that they may make a little bit there under a certain volume and also probably eat there as well. And then we also had a very long list of like retail, floral shops. I have appliance repair. We have auto parts. And again, it was this over and over again listed in CS. So we just consolidate that into retail establishments, large and small, with small being under 20,000 square feet and then large being above that. And that's limited to more like CS3s where we put the large. So that would kind of in a way require a rezoning as well as potentially a CZ to do the large, depending on the size of that. Is there any questions so far? I'm trying not to go too fast, but I don't want to belabor it.
No, sir.
Okay. Continuing on with changes. So we expanded and added the definitions like we've mentioned. We had quite a few uses already operating in town. As y'all know, we have a solar farm on the county's property. There's a state prison here. We have a fuel oil dealer just across on Brookdale, schools associated with AB Tech, all out the county property. We didn't address those. So we've added those definitions. And then we also added, as Ken pointed out, the server farm, the shooting ranges, daycares, mining, other uses that are either around us very close or coming to us soon or a request soon. And we want to go ahead and get in front of that. And then finally here, if you go to the table, we adjusted what was by right, limited, special, and then we actually added a new line item of expressly prohibited. And I think the one we kind of picked on was landfills. Since Woodfin's had its fair share of landfills through time, I think we're probably moving on past the landfill. And I said, reduce the number of uses requiring a SUP from 80 to 28. And then back to the homestay. We're We're proposing to eliminate that. So far, we've had kind of low interest. We've had 26 permits so far to date since November. I checked, Maria and I kind of conversed a little bit. We were talking, we know it's at least less than 10 that were new applications. A lot of people were catching up, were doing a homestay, and they obtained a permit after the November change almost 2 years ago and got a permit. Coincidentally, Marie whispered to me, she's like, I just had a phone call right before we come in here about one. But I will say that there is some difficulty in enforcing. We have some people that will apply, they provide all the documents, and then we get complaints from neighbors about chasing down that, hey, they're supposed to be living there, they're not there, there's 5 cars at that house, I think it's an STR. And then we call and check in, they provide the documents that prove I do still live there, but they shouldn't be leaving and flying to New Zealand for 2 weeks and renting out the whole house. And then there's still a concern about affordable housing because, as you know, if you have a detached homestay or a detached area like the basement apartment or basement wing, that potentially causes an asking price on a resale to be higher because that income potential pushes up that asking price of the home. So that's some question. We don't have any quantitative data, but it's something that honestly, I would ask for more myself. All right, I'll stop here a second. Any questions on this so far? I think, Shannon, was there one question about a definition that we had? Governing body. Governing board. So we just need to strike Planning Board of Adjustment out of that one. Okay.
I was going to ask about that, and I was just going to save this for the end, but I can go now. The other one that I had a question about was group care facility.
Mm-hmm.
That one, I just didn't know if we needed to be more specific, because right now it's reading, and this may be what it's always been, but it means a residential facility for 12 or fewer persons that requires a license by the state of North Carolina. Should we specify like a license under like 122C, the mental health statutes, or do we need to be more specific, like a license through DHHS, or are we intending this to apply to anything regardless of license? Like, because you could have, like, I know of an example of somebody that has a like firearms manufacturing license that they operate as a home occupation out of their property, and if we have it phrased as just any license, are we catching things in that definition that we're not intending to, if we're not specific on the type of license we're talking about?
I think there's different licenses. It kind of depends on the use.
Yeah.
And so I think what we're trying to say is if a license is required and you're housing 12 people or more, then then you meet this definition, and based on our use table, you're allowed or not allowed in certain districts.
And I think the implication is a licensure as a residential facility.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
Which would narrow it down to just residential use. Residential uses that require a state license.
Yeah.
Would be fairly.
Got it. Okay, so okay.
Yeah.
I think if you,
Maybe we're going to adjust that language to say a license as a residential facility.
Yes. Yeah. That's the solution.
And it may be too that Olivia, we can double check, but I think that those are only allowed in like 1 or 2 zoning districts. And if I recall, I'm thinking it might be like a commercial zoning districts that we allow.
Yeah, but that if it's just the clarification of that the license is to operate as a particular type of residential facility, then you're not going to inadvertently get any property with 12 or fewer that has some type of license. So.
Yeah. Yes. All right. Thank you.
The licensure is important because we have other group living environments that are permitted by the state that do not require a license. And so we're trying to make a distinction between family care home and this group.
Yeah, because I think the family care.
Eric's one was if you just say it requires a license, that could mean any kind of license
Right.
for any reason.
Right,
Somebody.
we don't want to do that.
Yeah, it's the residential facility, like a license as a residential facility that is triggering it.
Yes. And because family care home is up to 6 persons, and then this would be the 7 to 12. Any other questions? I don't, because I'm moving to review by other bodies before I don't want to move. I just want to make sure I pause here for a second. Seems like okay. So as I mentioned earlier, the Planning Board of Adjustment had looked at it again April, August, and yes, it said again September. The September meeting did go fairly quick. I think it was less than 30 minutes that we were here. And they approved it 5-0. They were happy with the information, but as you can tell, they spent quite a bit of time rolling through materials. Several had wanted to see, the documents and read well in advance of the meeting to ask very targeted questions. So I think they got a good handle of what you've seen tonight. And then we would recommend this text amendment, and I think maybe we should stop and go back. Group development, I think we should go back. We have in the SUPs group development. I think I kind of alluded that instead of 28, 27, we have this weird section that requires if you have 2 or more principal structures, it requires a group development. It's not directed at the use per se, just the fact that you have 2 buildings. So if you have an 8-unit apartment building, it's a single building, that's allowed by right, let's say in R7. If you were to break that into 2 quadplexes, that would trigger a group development. It's the same number of units, same number of parking spaces. It's just 2 buildings. And that kind of creates some confusion, like which process, and it could be that a use of be such size that it technically needs a CZ, but the way the code's written, it could be that says an S. So that could kind of put us at a loggerhead where which board does it go to? And Shannon and I talked a little bit, so we would probably just ask the board just to delete group development completely, the definition from the use table and from the SUP, and just eliminate that so there's no confusion at all, because it was kind of agnostic on use. It was literally distributed principal structures.
And quite honestly, the only reason it's not already incorporated is we just didn't notice it until it was already reviewed and approved by the planning board and on its way to council. So we didn't feel like we could, we didn't want to go back to the planning board because we felt it was a very straightforward request, but also didn't feel like we could change it midstream. So we're asking you all to consider removing it. Group development is today a special use. And we've run into, Woodfin has experienced troubles with this. The Robin Hood development was trying to make a case for being a group development when really it was just a large apartment building. And we've had, I think, the Bluffs was another project that was a group development. And the reason they want to do that is because it's such a large project that going through a conditional use permit process has objective statutory standards, and it's up to the planning board of adjustment, whereas a conditional zoning comes before this body and it's a legislative matter, and you can consider much more than just those 4 statutory standards. So it gives Woodfin more control over these uses. And again, as Ricky said, it's not a use, what they're describing, so it's very peculiar that it's included at all. I believe group development predates conditional zoning, and I think it's just an antiquated use that probably should just come out.
I think it was intended to get at intensity of development somehow, but it wasn't really thought through very much to where, like Ricky said, you can have the same total area footprint of all of it, and so it really, and it's only 1 building, why is that less intense than 2 buildings? But, and yeah, I agree though, it's caused more trouble than it's done good.
I have a general question that this removing group development raises. I'm not sure how to phrase it, but the analogy I'd give is a university catalog, a college catalog. Students come in under a certain catalog, and that's their catalog, even if in their 4th year, there's a new catalog. And a student may have a choice which catalog wants to go with. When you make, and you're making significant changes throughout, how does that impact either new or existing businesses, homes?
So this is all prospective. So these standards become effective. If council were to adopt them today, they become effective tomorrow or immediately. So any new applications that come in the door would be subject to these, to these revised standards. Anything that's in process actually has a choice, and the statute's very clear. It gives those applicants a choice between the existing standards that they were originally permitted under or the new standards that are developed. And, you know, if it's to their benefit to switch and apply the new standard, they will, but otherwise they usually just stick with it.
So that's what I thought it would be, and that indicates to me that record keeping is very important to know what set of standards you came in under, both business or resident, but also the town itself, keeping track of it.
So we keep track of every text amendment. They're all dated and recorded and saved, and we actually put them in our fireproof vault so that if there's a fire, we still have that record. Some of these records are kept in perpetuity, so we can go back quite a long way. We are now also keeping copies of ordinances. So this is the full ordinance that was in place in 1989. This is the ordinance that was in place in 1995. This is the ordinance. So that if somebody comes in and says, I was approved for this use back in 1991, we may not have a record of it, but sometimes we can find, like we may not have a permit record, but sometimes we can find it in our meeting minutes, or we'll just look for any kind of record that verifies that that was when it was approved. And then we can go to the document that was the rules that were in place at that time in order to know exactly what they are allowed and not allowed.
That all makes sense. Thank you for explaining it to me.
So with that, I will stop talking. I think you're ready to open a public hearing up.
All right, we'll have a public hearing regarding this text amendment. Is there anyone wishing to speak? We'll open it at 5:40. Anyone wishing to speak? Hearing none, we will close this public hearing at 5:42 p.m.
So I guess if there's no other questions, I'll put the suggested motion on the screen.
Does anyone else have any questions or concerns for Shannon, Ricky, or Marie?
No, the two changes, we could just add them in as okay.
Yeah.
And if not,
Then I'll entertain a motion.
Okay. I move to approve the proposed text amendment subject to the following changes. One, to modify the definition of governing board to make it clear that it's just this body, not this body, and or the planning board of adjustment. And then two, to change the definition for group care home from what is listed in the proposed ordinance to instead reading group care home means a residential facility requiring a license by the state of North Carolina housing 12 or fewer persons. And find that it is reasonable, is in the public interest, is consistent.
Yeah.
And strike through group development and remove that as a use. And find that it is reasonable, is in the public interest, is consistent with the Woodfin Together comprehensive plan, and meets the development needs of the community, and that the request, one, balances the supply of land for housing and employment and protects the land for economic development, and ensures an adequate supply of appropriately located and sized employment spaces, supports initiatives to transition towards a green economy, and encourages construction of developments that use renewable energy, design and infrastructure that reduces pollution and energy costs, makes government decision-making accessible and transparent to all residents while updating development standards to minimize risk from new development.
Do I hear a second?
Second.
All right, all those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Carries. And thank you, Ricky, Marie, and Shannon, and all else involved, because this was an incredible amount of work.
I'd like to second that. The complexity of this kind of task and the meticulousness and the concentration that it requires you guys did a great job.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, we will move on to the second item of new business, which is the town manager performance evaluation instrument and process discussion. This came about as the fact that as a council, we dropped the ball last year when it came to a review for Shannon. And so we have a subcommittee that has looked at that, which is made up of Councilman Khan, Councilman Cohen, and me. And you all have seen the documents that we have prepared in the information that you received prior to the meeting. What we all agreed on was that we really liked what Shannon provided to us last year as far as the goals and accomplishments. It was a very succinct list of what was completed and what we had ahead. So we wanted to adopt that as part of the process. The only thing we asked that anything that was part of our goals and objectives for the year be highlighted, and also that those be put in order basically of importance as well. So that was one of the documents that we provided. The other, we looked at probably, and gentlemen help me with this, 8 to 10 different evaluation tools from various towns. Some Shannon provided, some that we obtained. And then we also, in addition to that, came up with a document for process after contacting 5 different local municipalities to find out how they operated. So these are the documents that we have put in place that we are proposing that we use this next year. We didn't want to delay any longer because we're coming up on year 2 for Shannon, and we wanted to have something in place. Three, sorry, thank you. And so we wanted to have something ready. We know this will require modification through time. We are going to have further conversations about like 360 evaluations, all sorts of other issues that we talked about, but we knew that we needed to get something in place now to be able to be ready to start her third year evaluation. So, gentlemen, what else do we need to say about the process?
Well, one thing I might add, you mentioned 360. I think that the 3 of us agreed that 360 is valuable, but might be limited to direct reports. Then there were issues about who would actually conduct that, given the relationship between elected officials and staff. And we decided that we wanted to get this out now in front of council and come back to that issue at a later date. Does that seem like an accurate summary?
Yes,
That's
sir.
perfect. I did not want to let perfection get in the way of a good process, knowing that this will evolve as it needs to.
So what questions does anyone have about what we have proposed for this year?
We took a stab at a motion for you all, since it's not a staff proposal, so it's up to you guys to edit it.
Any questions about
I read through everything and it looks exactly what I was hoping it would. Like I said.
fulfilling
Right.
dreams? Well, I move to recommend the performance plan evaluation process and documents as recommended by the performance plan subcommittee.
Do I hear a second?
Second.
All right. All those in favor, raise your hand or say aye.
Aye.
Or both.
Any opposed? All right. Thank you. And last in new business is our community partner grant update in regard to our emergency home repairs. And Shannon, if you'll take this for us.
Thank you, Vice Mayor. So at the last council meeting in August, there was a discussion about renewing grants to 2023 recipients. These grants came about as part of a new program that the town developed back in 2022 that would award grants to service and nonprofits in our community who are performing work in one of these 3 areas: education, neighborhood and community development, or human services. So this is work that the town doesn't have the staff resources to perform or the expertise, but we have partners in our community performing this work. And with a little grant money, they're able to expand their scope into Woodfin or put more resources into Woodfin. As I mentioned, 3 grants were awarded in 2023. Those same 3 grants were re-awarded in 2024. And there was some discussion and interest in adding an emergency home repair grant. And I believe the council did actually vote to set aside $25,000 for an emergency home repair program. We didn't have details about how that program would work. And so there was also instruction to me to come back with a little bit more information. So I spent the last 30 days talking to some different providers in the area and learning a little bit more about the programs that they run. So first, I learned that there are at least 4 providers in our area already doing emergency home repair work. Mountain Housing Opportunities, Asheville Area Habitat for Humanity, SEMA Emma Potter, and the United Community Development, which I think is the newest of the 4. All of them they believe, have done work in Woodfin, are currently and continue to do work in Woodfin. Of these programs, all require that the homeowner live in the home and meet low income standards. One of the things that we discuss that's kind of nice about having different grant programs is we also have a grant program where we partner with ABCCM for emergency assistance. This is assistance, financial assistance that helps renters as well as potentially homeowners. So it's a way to kind of distribute the aid and the support in our community, but this is more focused on affordable housing and helping people who probably live in what we would qualify as affordable housing stay in their homes, not only stay in the homes, but help keep those homes safe environments for those individuals. 3 of the 4 providers that I mentioned make repairs to both stick-built and manufactured housing, and 1 provider, SEMA Emma Potter, makes repairs only to manufactured housing, which makes sense given their advocacy and interest in affordable housing. The cost of the repairs vary significantly. They were reluctant to give me numbers, but just kind of some ballpark numbers, anywhere from about $1,500 to replace a water heater all the way up to tens of thousands of dollars for a whole roof replacement or water line extensions or replacements, failing septic systems. All of these things are those higher price items. Also, the nature of the repairs vary. One of the most common is modifying the home for accessibility purposes to accommodate some sort of disability or infirmity. Repairing heating and cooling systems or components of those systems, roof and floor repairs, plumbing and electrical repairs, and exterior painting, staining, siding repairs, things of that nature. But there's more than this. That was the kind of work that they do, but these are some of the most common ones that they mentioned. So if this sounds agreeable to the council, what we're recommending is that for next steps, we would update and post our online application. This is the application that we created back in 2022, and we would probably just amend it, put a little bit more information on there that the town is now earmarking some additional funds for this kind of program, and then reach out to the providers that we've already contacted, let them know, and invite them to apply. We can form a small review committee, and then that committee ideally would include 1 council member, and we would review those applications and make our preferred selection, and then identify any conditions of the agreement. One thing that Councilmember Cohen and I have been discussing is we really wanted to try to leverage the money that Woodfin is setting aside. We don't want to just, give a nonprofit $25,000 and then $25,000 that they may have spent in Woodfin now suddenly gets spent somewhere else. Our goal is to increase the amount of emergency home repair that's already occurring. So we're exploring some different conditions of the agreement that would achieve that. I've talked to a couple other individuals about, is that a match? Is it only allowing up to 25% of our funds to be used for repair? So there's a few different ways you can approach it and just trying to figure out the most practical way forward. And then once those are determined, we would draft up that agreement and execute it with our preferred partner. So our recommendation is summarized here. It more or less identifies the steps that I just went over, and that's pretty much it. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Does anybody have any questions or discussion?
I like the leveraging. That was going to be my point, is if we can get some sort of concrete agreement that they'll provide whatever amount of funding or other resources. Are we envisioning just selecting one though? Because if we're doing that, it seems like that would probably just disqualify the Emma Poder one right away if they only work on manufactured housing. But they might also have subject matter expertise that would be useful for that particular type of housing. So
Yeah.
I wouldn't want to just automatically say we're definitely only going with one.
I mean, I guess that could be part of the recommendation. I will say, talking to all of these providers, they all work with each other.
Okay.
So where they don't have expertise, or they may be aware, like, well, this is a very serious plumbing issue, and I know that this organization actually has a really great plumber that they work with, and we've run out of money, so we're going to refer you over there. So they all kind of work with each other. I know that when it comes to manufactured housing, there are some resources that they all kind of collaborate around. So I don't think we'll have that problem, but that is certainly something we can explore.
In terms of matching, which of course sounds like leverage, what sort of things are we allowed to do as a municipality? Can we raise funds? Can we solicit matching funds?
Oh, well, so the match that we're discussing is we would provide 25,000 and the nonprofit would have to secure 25,000 from somebody else. So whether that's Buncombe County or other sources, so they would match our funds to be applied only in Woodfin. After talking to a couple of people, I think what makes more sense is for our agreement with the nonprofit to specify what percentage of our funds can be applied to any single repair. And the one that I spoke with actually recommended 25,000 or 25%, which would leverage us up to 100,000. So if that is indeed an option, then that I think gives us, that's great leverage. That's a 4-to-1 leverage. So, and that's really exciting to think about. And they do have other sources of funding that they rely on. We want to be careful that other providers of those funds may not feel comfortable earmarking those funds to be applied only in Woodfin. So it would be up to the nonprofit to figure out what source of funds would be used for those different repairs.
Assuming that this produces some good outcomes, which we assume, is there a way we can go back or I'm trying to think, how is this capped? In other words, if we're getting 4-to-1 leverage on something, can we come back and visit and say, it'd be great to put another $25,000 in that kitty? Is that something that
I think
sounds reasonable, or?
We do require reporting of all of our partners. So they would come back and report to the council about how many homes they served, what was the average cost of a repair. They'll give us some data. And then in our annual budget workshops, we would explore, this program and funding for this program. And by then you will have probably received a report or would be close to having that report. So we would definitely have an idea. And there's some other conditions that we want to explore, like, do we want to cap how much is spent on a single repair? We don't want all 25,000 to be spent on one repair. So we may want to, kind of explore some different conditions, which are pretty common. After speaking to these providers, I learned that they're used to these conditions.
And I'd like to recommend, since Councilmember Cohen's been working on this, that he be our representative on the review committee.
Do we need to get into the level of detail? Like, are we going to ask these providers to come up with their own recommended income restrictions?
They all use HUD. They all use HUD.
What I mean, are they all the same percentage, or are they?
I believe so. Don't quote me on that. I should double check that.
Yeah, it's just that's the type of details that I'd be interested in seeing, and I'm fine with having the subcommittee or whatever we're referring to it as work all those out. But if it's like a lot of details that are being hashed out, and that if you have any doubt as to whether, I'm just saying, feel free to come back to council with whatever the recommendation is. Don't just, if there's any uncertainty about whether you think you've got it exactly right, because there's a lot of moving parts.
Yeah. Thank you. And then any other special thoughts or conditions that you all have that you might think of later, just please email me and Phil, and we'll take it from there.
I have just one additional detailed thought. Is there, or do they look at this through a triage filter? Or there are some repairs that are more life-threatening or safety-threatening than others, and those get priority? Or is it really kind of first come, first served?
Just knowing the work that they do and the attention that they pay, I have to believe the answer would be yes, but I didn't ask them that specifically. And I think there is sort of an art to balancing these funds. I know one thing that was discussed, not just amongst these providers when I talked to them, but at a recent Housing Alliance meeting that I attended was, being confronted with repairs that are so extensive that really the recommendation from the contractor is to demolish the home and not repair it, but then that gives that person no other options. So unfortunately, they do get in a situation where, they don't always feel like it's the best way to spend the money, but it's a necessary way to spend the money, so.
There's one other piece of information relating to this. I was under the mistaken impression that Buncombe County funds could be used just in Woodfin. That is, I was hoping that both our funds and the funds of the third-party partner would enable us to go to Buncombe County for funds. And because that's what I thought I heard, but I was wrong, from Matthew Cable. Understandably, Buncombe County funds can be used in Buncombe County. It's hard to restrict it. But Shannon had some ideas, both for the third-party partner, in ways that we might be able to still go forward seeking funds and use some of them in Woodfin. So again, there's this issue of how do we keep building layers of funding to maximize the amount of money in the entire program.
Someone's better than none.
Exactly.
And this is, of course, something that helps the citizens of Woodfin.
Right.
And so that's why it's so important for, that we take the steps, do it right, get it in the correct method that we need to make it a real benefit. All right, any other questions or concerns? Do you need anything else from us on
Move to
this?
authorize it.
If you just want to make a motion.
Move to authorize and direct the town manager to post the town's community partner grant application and inform area nonprofits of the opportunity to apply, and establish a review committee to review applications and establish criteria for how the grant will be applied, and to authorize the town manager to enter into the agreement with the selected nonprofit.
And also to name.
And to name Councilman Cohen as our council member on the review committee.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All right, all those in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed? All right. No closed session tonight necessary? Wonderful. All right, I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
Move to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All right.